Political leaders who command the confidence of the House of Commons. It's a pretty crucial rule, isn't it? Unless Liz is going to run us. That's not written down anywhere. Nowhere. I mean, it's written down in many, many history books and books that people like myself write on the Canadian Constitution, but you can't look it up in a book. And most of the rules of parliamentary government take the form of those political agreements, conventions, understandings that have arisen over many years, that have converted a parliament based on a basically monarchical system of government into a constitutional democracy, and in which Parliament is a democratic body. Now there's three, to get to prorogation, there are three legal powers with respect to Parliament particularly that are exercised specifically in law by the Crown. In 1946, George VI authorized the Governor-General of Canada to exercise those powers in Canada. They're huge powers when you think of it. They're the power to summon Parliament, to dissolve it and have another election, and to prorogue it. Until a couple of years ago, I had no idea how important that baby was. Now, in a democratic age, the Governor-General's powers, including the power to summon, dissolve, and prorogue, are exercised normally, this is the normal default position, by the politicians who command the confidence of the House of Commons, and that would be the Prime Minister of the day. That's the normal rule. The Governor-General doesn't say, well, I've had enough of this Parliament, where you go, or let's have an election, or you just had an election, I'm sick of Parliament after this election, I'll summon it, you know, and there is a rule, it has to be summoned in a year. Not at all. In a democratic age, normally the Governor-General here, or the Queen in the United Kingdom, exercises those powers on the advice of the Prime Minister. Now, and here's the difficult issue arises. The normal condition, I'll just repeat, is you exercise the powers, the Governor-General, on the advice of the Prime Minister. The question is, could there be any circumstances in which the Governor-General would be more than a clerk? More than a clerk, just say, you asked for an election, here's your certificate. You asked for a prorogation, here it is, it's tax. You know, I've got no discretion at all. You're democratic and I'm not. Are there any what are called reserved powers? Powers reserved to the Governor-General or the Queen in England, or Governor-Generals in the other Westminster countries, any reserved powers to exercise the Governor-General's own judgment and discretion, to make a judgment call, to think over, to consider whether she should grant the request, the advice given by the Prime Minister. Well, what we have found, and you know this, is that in 2008, it became very clear that we did have a situation where it wasn't clear to a lot of people that the Governor-General should just automatically grant a dissolution. We had that situation again this year. We had even, I think, in some ways, a more serious disagreement about the rules governing prime ministerial requests for an election, for a dissolution. Let's repeat that. Right? We had a more serious evidence of a breakdown of political consensus on when the Governor-General should take a Prime Minister's advice and call an election. And that was the crisis of 2008. Just to recall, just very, very briefly, you'll remember there was, after Mr. Harper, well, it wasn't him, but Mr. Flaherty, his finance minister's statement, his economic statement, mobilized the three opposition parties. Two would form a coalition supported by the third, and it would be led by the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Dion. And they looked like they were ready to take over. And this was in November the 29th, to be exact, and we'd have an election on October the 14th, not long ago. And Mr. Harper said that this couldn't happen. There were two reasons why it couldn't have a change of government, even if he was defeated. He was defeated on a vote of confidence. One was, you can't change from one party to another without an election. Now, as far as those of us who teach in this area, that was the first time anyone had ever enunciated that rule, that you had to go to the electorate to change from one party to another. The other was you couldn't change to a coalition that had not been put before the electorate and sort of blessed or seen by the electorate to be a real possibility before the election. Another new rule, not only new to Canada, if we adopted it, but I don't know any parliamentary democracy, and they're just full of coalitions, that has such a rule, that coalitions have to be formed and evident before the election. They can't be combinations of parties that occur after the election. And the reason why many of us who teach this subject have always thought that the Governor General should have some discretion to say to a Prime Minister, particularly one who's been defeated, soon after an election, and a couple of months is soon after the election, be able to say, well, sir, I think I have another Prime Minister who's showing evidence of having the support of a majority in the House of Commons. The reason why a lot of us have always thought that is a decent constitutional convention to give the Governor General that judgment is without that rule, a really ruthless Prime Minister, after he gets the election results and it looks like he's lost his majority and doesn't have a hope in hell of being upheld in the newly elected House of Commons, could just say to the Governor General, I didn't like that election very much. Please, madam, please dissolve it. And then you could have another one, and oh gosh, that wasn't much good either. So Governor General, please dissolve the House of Commons. And as Eugene Forsey said, that you can be hammered into eventually giving such a ruthless Prime Minister an election. In other words, the Governor General's reserve power is there to protect a parliamentary democracy against, it's pretty unlikely, but a Prime Minister who hasn't liked the recent results and just wants to keep having elections till he gets the result he wants. So those were Mr. Harper's new rules, the rules that I had taught and written in my book, and not just me. There were 37 of us took out who teach this subject in law schools and political science departments. I don't know if you remember, we took out, well, we wrote a column and then it was turned into an ad to say that wasn't our understanding. It wasn't the understanding of the Liberals, the NDP, or the Bloc Québécois. And here's the point to keep in mind about constitutional rules and conventions. Remember, they're not written down, right? They depend on a political consensus. That's the only way they can work. They have to be accepted by the key players in parliamentary democracy, key political players. And what you saw then on that vital issue of dissolving Parliament or not, or having another government after an election, a change in government, you saw a breakdown of consensus as between the Conservatives and the opposition. And you can say, and some of my colleagues would say to me, well, Peter, Harper's just wrong. And I'd say, well, yeah, I think so, but he's Prime Minister. And he has the most popular party. He's not terribly popular in the country. And you can't just be ignored. And you can't have rules